I've always known David hated me. He married me because I lost the use of my right hand saving him. But later, he was the one who said, Nancy, you'll never be better than your sister in your life. And it was him who said, I was wrong, will you come back? The day my sister performed at the Vienna Music Hall, my right hand was diagnosed as never being able to play the piano again. David married me that day. He didn't like me, I knew it. That day, he stepped under a huge curtain to save my sister. I pushed him away, and my right hand got hit by a falling curtain. In the hospital corridor, my mom grabbed his collar, hysterically yelling, You jinx! Jinx! Adopting you was a mistake, it's all because of you that Nancy turned out like this. Nancy might never play the piano again, do you know that? At 2 a.m., I woke up from the hospital bed. David sat at my bedside, eyes downcast, holding my fingers. Your mom asked me to be responsible for you. He put a soda can pull tab on my ring finger. So, will you marry me? That was how my dream proposal began. The later marriage just kept shattering this dream over and over. I sat on the couch until 1 a.m., waiting for David to come home. He stood in the doorway, coldly staring at me, not sleeping yet? David, where have you been? I tilted my head up to ask him. He answered openly, picking your sister up from the airport, she just returned to the country. Why are you picking her up? I wanted to smile casually. You treasure her that much? If I don't treasure her, should I treasure you? His reply practically crushed all the confidence I had gathered. I remembered what he said back when I could still play the piano, Nancy. Even if you played for 10 years, you'd never be better than your sister. I heard a light mocking laugh beside me. What? Ready to complain to your mom again? He pinched my shoulder. His ears were a bit red, he probably drank. A kiss landed on my mouth corner. He pulled off his tie. Fine, I take back what I just said. Nancy, I'm crazy about you, you're my treasure. When he said that, I could sense the hate almost spilling over. After my sister returned, she suggested a get-together. Nobody found the dinner particularly enjoyable, except David. Coming out of the restroom, I saw David standing with my sister in the hallway. I hadn't seen him smile in ages, funny how nice his smile was. Congrats, you won in Finland this time, right? David had his hands in his pockets, speaking nonchalantly. David, it's thanks to your guidance, my sister gave him a sweet smile. I instinctively turned my ring and was about to walk out when another woman's voice interrupted me. Annie, what are you up to? My mom, purse in hand, came out, frowned, and scrutinized my sister, her other daughter. Mind you, today's your sister's birthday. Don't pull any stunts. We're here because of her. After saying that, my mom walked back to the private room without a glance back. For the first time, cracks showed in my sister's sweet and cute expression. I saw her grip her fists tight, her eyes red. At the table, she kept drinking. This dinner, meant to be a cheerful family gathering, fell apart instead. After my parents divorced, my mom always resented my sister, because she resembled Dad, while I took after Mom. Nancy, eat more, have you not been eating well these days? David, you too. Make sure Nancy eats well. David gave a light reply next to me. My mom gave him a glare and continued piling food into my bowl. My sister tried to get a piece of fish, but my mom beat her to it, giving me the best part of the fish. My sister's chopsticks hovered in midair. After that, she didn't touch a single dish, just kept drinking. In the end, the whole meal had only my mom eagerly talking to me. The atmosphere was bizarre. Finally, the meal was over and a driver took my mom home. Before leaving, she held my hand warmly, not even glancing at my sister. After she got in the car, my silent sister suddenly grabbed David's sleeve with red eyes. She shyly asked, David, could you drive me home? I've drunk too much, can't stand. David and I drove there, so it wouldn't have been a problem to drop her off. But now, my sister clung tightly to David's sleeve, pitifully looking at me with red eyes. Can you not take David's car? That was basically kicking me out of the car. David supported her, standing silently beside. Looking at them, a deep sense of powerlessness came over me. "I'll call a cab for you," I took out my phone, saying to my sister. "No. I'm pretty famous now, okay? I don't want strangers knowing my address." Her eyes were teary, and she deliberately rubbed against David's arm. I couldn't stand it any longer and was about to pull her away when David spoke up. "We should call a cab." I was pretty surprised by his response. He wasn't siding with my sister but supporting me. It was a plot twist worthy of a sci-fi novel. Then he calmly looked at me and said, "You get a cab first. Your sister's in this state. She can't go home on her own. I'll take her to the hospital first. She's drunk, and who knows if it'll affect her hands. A pianist's hands are more precious than anything." But when the doctor said I would never play again, "David, you didn't even blink." I took a deep breath, stepping back a few steps, and somewhat haltingly said to him, "Yes, she's your proudest student." "And me, what about me?" My expression left David stunned for a moment. He then lowered his eyes, protecting my sister as he helped her into the front seat. "Be careful on your way back." That was all he said before climbing into the driver's seat. That's the only thing David ever left me. David is my mom's adopted son. At 17, he moved in with us and became the piano teacher for my sister and me. His family owed my mom a lot of money, so he had to pay it back by giving up his dreams and teaching us piano. Back then, he was called a once-in-a-century piano prodigy, yet he sacrificed his future for us. I always thought David equally hated my sister and me. But later, I realized he really just had a problem with me. My sister was really talented. "Emily, you don't play as well as your sister did at 7. It was like that for most teachers, they tend to favor their top students. But David, that wasn't mere favoritism. He'd correct every single one of my sister's mistakes, kind and patient. With me, he was icy. "You just don't have the talent. Don't you see that?" I first guessed he liked my sister, but then I got it. David couldn't get back to international stages, so he pinned all his hopes on my sister. Because she had the gift. It was like one genius recognizing another. But he couldn't be her teacher for long. After my mom got divorced, she took both me and David away. David then became solely my teacher. Back home, I took the cake out of the fridge. If my sister hadn't planned this dinner, David and I would have shared the cake, but now, I regretted it a little. A 6-inch cake is just too much for one person. I lit a candle and made a wish, then sliced myself a piece and wished myself happy birthday. Finally, I opened the box and poured some pills into my palm. I think I have a bit of depression. After my hand injury, Mom had me see a psychiatrist. Back then, I didn't care much. But these days, sleepless nights and anxiety have taken over. The doctor said being unhappy all the time is a sickness, it requires medication. I never told David. He'd just call me dramatic. I planned on taking the meds with the cake. The front door suddenly opened. Dressed in all black, David entered. He immediately noticed the pills in my hand. He paused, then quickly walked over, grabbing my wrist. "What meds are you taking?" His question threw me off a bit, and then I realized his hand was shaking as he held my wrist. What meds and why? I instinctively tightened my grip around the pills. "Just sleeping pills. I haven't been sleeping well." He snatched the bottle from my hand. Took a brief glance at it. Fluoxetine, sertraline. No sleeping pill needs these sorts of antidepressants. We both knew that. But all he did was toss it into the trash right in front of me. "Stop taking them." He left me with those words and walked into the dark bedroom. There's a piano in the study. I sat there all night. But every time I placed my hands on the keys, I'd start shaking, unable to play a single note. Back in high school, I kind of liked David. A young girl with a first crush is easily smitten by someone striking. The guys in class were all sweaty, and David was like a lone pine on a snowy peak. After the divorce, living with David, Mom was always away for work. Only David was there. Besides piano, he was quite kind to me. He'd sit beside me, resting his chin on his hand as I did homework. "You got that function wrong. It's F, X, not F, Y. Are you even listening?" He'd tap my cheek with his pen, sigh, "Never mind, let me explain it another way." He'd secretly talk with the housekeeper about meals for me. "Could you check if they have fresh fish at the market tomorrow? She seems to have lost her appetite. Is the pressure too much?" Sometimes the driver was on leave, so he'd take me to and from school. When some guys from class bothered me, he'd show up with a metal pipe in hand. "You want to take those dirty hands off? Or should I teach you how to leave?" For a time, I thought David cared about me to some extent. The heart of a teenage girl tends to wander endlessly yet free, but every time David taught me piano, he'd personally shatter my daydreams. "Don't you hear how bad you sound? It's too stiff, Nancy. You've got none of your sister's talent. Just stop. You're not made for the piano." In high school, those were David's most common words to me. Once seated at the piano, he seemed to become someone else, always criticizing me. But I'd earned my way into the conservatory, and teachers at school praised me just couldn't play like my sister. I just couldn't be that genius. One day I came home from school and found my dad had brought my sister back. Dad was struggling, my sister's clothes were dirty too. She sat at my piano, fingers dancing and flowing with the music. At that moment, I realized I wouldn't win. Finishing her piece, David knelt in front of her, looking up at her. He smiled at her, a smile he never gave me. "Well done. Annie, you are meant for the piano." My sister then threw her arms around him. Tearfully, she said, "I wish I had a piano like this. I wish David could keep teaching me." As she spoke, she'd obviously seen me standing in the doorway with my backpack on. But David didn't see me. I watched as he paused, then gently patted her back in comfort. I listened to him, word by word, as he clearly told my sister, "It's okay, Annie, you've got something your sister can't take away from you. You've got talent, she doesn't. She's destined to stand in the dark corner while you step onto the spotlight." That day, I scored 127 on my math test, the highest I've ever gotten. David had been tutoring me in math, and I was planning to go home early to share the good news with him. But in the end, I crumpled the paper into a ball and tossed it in the trash. That night, I buried myself under the blanket, crying like the world was ending. Awake? A slightly cold voice snapped me back to reality. I weakly propped myself up. "Did you catch a chill in the study last night?" The man in the white shirt stood by my bed, reaching out to touch my head, which I dodged. He froze for a second and then casually asked, "Mad at me?" Seeing I had no intention of talking to him, he climbed into bed and hugged me through the blanket. "Nancy, you can be mad at me, but take the cold meds first, all right? He's always like this with me. Hot one moment, cold the next, depending on his mood. At times gentle like he's a caring husband, and other times, wishing I was gone." I held the hand clasped around my waist. David's skin was always pale and cold, with veins visible on the back of his hand. Softly, I said, "Let's get a divorce." For a long time, I didn't hear an answer from him. He was so quiet, as if he had fallen asleep behind me. After a while, I felt him pull me into his arms. "No. I don't really want a divorce." Even his answer was so indifferent. It made it hard for me to breathe. I pushed him away and got off the bed. But suddenly, he grabbed my wrist. With a swift move, he pinned me beneath him. He lifted my chin and left a mark with a kiss. "Don't make a fuss, Nancy. Are you really expecting me to be all tender with you? Who made me like this in the first place? So, walk with me through hell, Nancy." David was once forced to pay off his parents' debts, sacrificing his future. But he poured all his resentment onto me. Yet, towards my sister, he showed kindness. Because he was a genius, and so was my sister, but I wasn't. My sister sent me an invite. It's her first performance back home. Even the seats at the far edge cost over $5,000, but I saved you a VIP seat. She knew I'd come, and I would indeed go. She also sent one to Mom, who didn't even look at it and tossed it aside. My sister clutched the ticket, her eyes red with anger. Then she turned to me, like she'd found a scapegoat to vent on. David's coming to see me play too. And then, with feigned guilt, she covered her mouth. It's too bad, because there's a segment planned with David, he can't sit with you. Honestly, I didn't care, I was going mainly to see David, which is why I accepted her invitation. David had been avoiding me these past few days. When we got married, he had a sour face the whole time, and now he refuses to get a divorce. On the day of the performance, it seemed like the city's music hall had never been this packed. I remember 10 years ago, the performances were not this grand. Even if my sister had become a rising female artist, the popularity felt a bit too over the top. It wasn't until ticket check-in that I overheard some audience members nearby talking. You're here for Luke too, right? Yeah, even though he doesn't perform much today, but it's so hard to get tickets for his solo concerts. Just seeing him for a few minutes is worth it. Hearing him live is unforgettable. Having stopped following piano performances after I could no longer play, this Luke seemed to have quite a standing in the field. As I walked through the long corridor, posters of the participating musicians lined the walls. I casually looked and spotted the Luke they were talking about. To my surprise, the person in the poster was unexpectedly young. He looked even younger than my sister, with a high nose bridge, pressed lips, and dark eyes staring at the camera. He made me think of beautiful but cold obsidian. And somehow, he looked familiar, like I'd seen him somewhere before. You're here? My sister waited for me in the dressing room. I had complicated feelings towards Annie. On one hand, we shared the same blood. On the other hand, our twisted childhoods made us wish to erase each other's existence. I replaced you on the stage at Vienna's Golden Hall. The people there admire me, a theater full of people, something you've never seen in your life, right? I leaned against the door, eyeing her coldly. Did you call me in here just to say this? If my sister had said this to me 3 years ago, at my bedside, I might have felt something. But nights of solitude had long eaten away the pain, my heart had gone numb. She shook her head and continued. Sis, you think I'm happy beating you, don't you? But honestly, I live each day painfully. What good are awards? What good is fame? What I truly want. She wanted Mom's love. I answered her in my heart. Like how Annie and I each longed for what the other had. She looked at me with a bit of pain, then grabbed something on the table. Sis, do you love David? I was stunned for a moment, then she laughed. Whether you do or not doesn't matter. You've lived with him for so long, surely you have feelings for him. You took Mom's love away, and I'm going to take what you love. So, guess what? Will David choose me or you? Realizing what she was about to do, I tried to stop her, but it was too late. She lifted the scissors in her hand, cut her own palm, and forced the scissors into my hand. Instinctively, I pushed her away, and blood dripped from her hand. I heard her sobbing, "You're jealous of me, so you cut my hand?" Next came the sound of a table being pushed and someone rushing over. The man held her, his hands trembling as he treated her wound. I opened my mouth, wanting to explain something, only to meet cold, piercing eyes. My cheek turned to the side, for a moment, until the sting of the slap registered. He had just slapped me. The one who slapped me was the man I'd been married to for 3 years. David. I thought I'd be angry, furious, and lose it completely, but I didn't. Weirdly enough, I felt super calm on the inside. I touched my nose and noticed blood was dripping from it too. Nosebleed, huh? David, you really didn't hold back. I chuckled, shook my head, and stood up. For a long time, I couldn't hear any sound. David hit me, but it seemed like he was in shock himself. Nancy, me? His voice seemed a bit shaky, as if he wanted to hold my hand, but I shook him off. Nancy, listen to me, He seemed like he wanted to tell me something else. I really stopped, and he was stunned again, while I watched him still protect my sister in his arms. I shouldn't have hit you, but Nancy, you shouldn't have attacked your sister. Do you know how important a pianist's hands are? I slapped him backhandedly. I didn't hold back either. I sent him off to the side, and his bangs fell down. I couldn't see the expression on his face. I stood in front of him and said softly, "David, thank you." I heard his breath catch and he almost sounded uneven this time. "I really see you clearly. I'm not very sad. Not that angry either." David took a knife, endlessly stabbing at my heart until one day, it didn't hurt anymore. He burned all the love away bit by bit, so now I can finally look at him expressionlessly. I don't like him anymore. Just like he wanted. I went back to pack my things. When Mom found out I was getting a divorce, she said she'd get me the best divorce lawyer to fight the case. My daughter finally figured it out. I always said there are tons of good men out there. He dares not to divorce you? If he dares, I'll make sure he ends up in jail. You believe that? David probably won't fight me legally. It's not like him, to lose composure over anything. But as I stared at a dozen or so missed calls on my phone, I felt speechless. "Call me one more time, and I'll call the police." The man's voice on the phone was hoarse. Before I would have worried if he caught a cold. Now, I just wanted to hang up. Turns out this is what it feels like when people change. "Nancy, listen to me. I didn't get the facts straight before acting like that with you. It's my fault. Can you calm down? Give me a chance to talk to you face to face." I interrupted him. "I'm very calm. I'll draft the divorce agreement and email it to you, Mr. David. Stop bugging me, this isn't like you." Even after hanging up, I still felt nothing inside. I leaned against the window, staring at the place I lived for 3 years. Once, I bent over backward to make this house feel like a home. Once, I sat on the couch countless times, waiting for the man called husband to come back. I carefully cradled something called love. Then he smashed it with his own hands, again and again. In the end, I was left with nothing, unable to even hold my fondness. I closed the piano lid one last time. Just like closing the chapters linked to David. "Mom, I get what you mean. But I just got divorced. It's really not the right time now." In a cafe, I rubbed my brow a bit awkwardly. To be honest, these past few days have been exhausting. If I hadn't blocked and threatened David, the divorce wouldn't have been this easy. After the divorce, rather than leaving me alone, he became like a ghost haunting me more than ever. And now my mom insists on setting me up on dates. I know she means well, but this feels like being pushed into a new relationship. She doesn't care if I can handle it. "Don't you trust someone your mom set you up with?" Mom took my hand, sounding very earnest. "This person has both the looks and the status, way better than David, isn't he?" Yes, I looked at the materials Mom handed me. He indeed had looks and status. But why is the name on the papers Luke? The same person I glimpsed on a poster at a concert before. A guy whose solo concerts are nearly impossible to get tickets for. As far as I know, his fame is significant both domestic and abroad. Even my sister, who is now a rising star, can't compare. Did Mom really think this through? Why would a just divorced woman like me go on a blind date with him? Besides, he's 5 years younger than me. He would only agree to this out of respect for my mom, right? Just give it a try. Mom twisted the ring on her finger. What's the harm in trying? No one would dare mess with you for your mom's sake, will they? Mom said this with a smiling face, but I felt a strange chill at the back of my neck. Why do I get the feeling my mom's acting more and more like a mob boss? The location for the blind date was a very classy Western restaurant. I came with the mindset of just having a simple meal. So, to say I dressed up, I didn't really make an effort. Since the other person is much younger than me and such a famous pianist. How could someone like me, no talent, and with ruined hands, attract him? Plus, honestly, I'm not in the mood for a relationship right now. This restaurant's unique feature is being built inside an aquarium, surrounded by drifting aquatic creatures. With the lighting, it genuinely creates an undersea world vibe. Guided by the waiter, I walked inside and finally saw him at the end of the path. Some people seem to have a natural ability to draw others' attention. Wearing a white shirt, he rested his chin on his hand, sitting at the two-person dining table. His features reflected in the blue waves, lonely and distant. Under the air of aloofness, I thought today's blind date would be over quickly. That's what I assumed. But this young guy opposite me seemed inexplicably interested in me. Not only did he keep staring at me, but he also took the initiative to introduce the restaurant to me. It seemed he had really prepared, even knowing when the sharks would swim by. Nancy, do you dislike it here? No, it's beautiful here. I cut a piece of steak and put it in my mouth. Even the steak was cooked to perfection. But why is this guy across from me staring so much? And why does he have to smile while doing it? Luke, do I have something on my face? I asked cautiously. He just laughed, his eyelashes lowered. Nancy, your face has a unique beauty. How sweet of him. The mellow sound of a cello playing in the restaurant slightly eased my discomfort. I kept looking at the person sitting opposite and finally asked that nagging question from earlier. You look familiar to me. Have we met somewhere before? The guy across from me just smiled without saying a word. Suddenly, my face turned red. Seriously, what was I even asking? It felt like a cheesy pickup line until I heard him say softly, "We haven't met." Then, almost whispering, he added, "Just remember that I mean now." What? I blinked, not really grasping what he meant. I saw him shut off his phone and smile. It was raining outside. Let me drive you home. I'm sitting in the silver Maserati. Outside, the heavy rain drenched the city, but inside, relaxing piano music played on the stereo. Love letter, huh? I thought someone like Luke, who plays classical, wouldn't be into this kind of music. Isn't this vibe a little too sad? I sighed, and he turned off the music. Sorry. Did I choose the wrong song? He looked at me apologetically, making me feel a bit awkward instead. No, not at all. Between red and green lights, he tapped the steering wheel, tilting his head to look at me. Do you play the piano too? Come over to my place to play sometime? I hesitated for a moment, then shook my head. Better not. I have an injury, can't really play. But your hands aren't broken, you could still play. The car started moving, and he didn't look at me, just focused on the road, continuing, No, my hands shake. I'll mess up. So what if you make mistakes? It wouldn't be perfect, so what if it's not perfect? I just can't play it. You can if you want to, he insisted. I told you, I can't play anymore. My voice got loud before I realized it. The car pulled up outside my building. Rain poured over us as he focused on the steering wheel and glanced at me sideways. Then don't play, okay? He reached over and ruffled my hair. It never occurred to me that a guy 5 years younger could comfort me. Embarrassed about my outburst, I ducked my head, and he just kept messing with my hair. I was about to pull away when he suddenly grabbed my wrist. The guy was really close. Maybe too close. Look outside. Is that your ex? I followed his gaze through the rain and saw a dark figure. David was there, under an umbrella, waiting outside. If I did something to you now, Luke's long piano-playing fingers toyed casually with my seatbelt. He had a citrus scent. Would my ex flip out? But Luke just hugged my neck gently. His tall nose brushed my ear, and I realized then his eyes were a light shade, his features striking. He had an unforgettable mixed-race look. As he leaned me back in the seat, I noticed a tiny mole on his collarbone. Like a star fallen from the galaxy. Suddenly, I remembered a long ago night when I held him just like this. Warm fingertips brushed my earlobe. His soft laughter broke the moment. Did you really think I wouldn't do anything to you? His voice was low, almost threatening, as he squeezed out the words. That's when it hit me, I was pinned by a grown man. The rain outside sounded like an endless symphony, clouding my thoughts. I looked up at him, puzzled. Then he laughed, a laugh I'd never associated with him. My head started spinning, until he pushed back my bangs. Left a soft kiss on my forehead. The swirling rain reflected in his eyes, an endless ocean. I'm not too late, am I? This time, I'll save you. Who was that guy? I was snapped back to reality by another voice, feeling hands gripping my wrist. David, soaked to the bone. I watched rainwater drip from his sleeve. Seeing him this lost was new to me. Nancy, did he do something to you? Did he kiss you? He asked, looking like he might break his teeth from clenching so hard. I shook free, nodding slightly. He looked up suddenly, disbelief all over his face. You've changed. Changed? I didn't even know how to define it. Maybe I just never truly cared for him. Nancy, you found someone else, didn't you? Is that why you wanted a divorce? His panic grew with every word, but inside, I felt nothing at all. Think whatever you want. Can you move aside? I tried to get past him to unlock my front door, but he blocked me. Frustrated, I opened my mouth to ask what he wanted. And then, he dropped to his knees, gripping my wrist. Rain turned the hallway into a blur as he held my hand, trembling. Okay, Nancy, it's fine if you've changed. Just give me a chance to win you back. These days, I can't eat or sleep. We've been together so long. When did you become so important to me? Please don't go. Please. His forehead pressed against the back of my hand. In the hallway light, our shadows stretched long against the wall. Nancy, I've never cheated on you. I only cared about your sister's talent. She's a genius. I just wanted to help her reach the top. You know how much the piano means to me. I swear on everything, I've never liked your sister. You were the only one I hugged, the only one I kissed. You've always been the only woman in my life. I couldn't stand to see a pianist like that lose everything, so that day, I helped your sister instinctively. Why did it end like this? I don't know. He slowly covered his face with his hands. I'd never seen David like this, helpless, disheveled. Muttering that he didn't want to lose me, I reached out to him. David, I said, and he stared at me. I used to like you. Did you know that? I asked, and he flinched. In high school, I dreamed of earning your approval. I wanted to hear you praise me, so I practiced piano in secret. I knew I wasn't gifted, played poorly, but it was okay. You didn't praise me. Then you slapped me. I pointed at my heart. I liked you. But the person I liked slapped me. That slap wiped away the girl who liked you. She knows there's no future for you too. She knows you'll always let her down for her sister. So she left. Makes sense, right? I smiled at him. People should know when to cut their losses, right? He looked at me silently but held on to my wrist tight. Nancy, give me a chance, will you? But why should I give you that chance? Finally, unable to hold back, I yelled at him, why didn't you care about me from the start? Why didn't you stand by me from the beginning? What does your liking even mean? Is it that cheap? Do you like me so much that you need to slap me yourself? What does it mean to wake up now, if you even woke up? Why didn't you realize it when I was there waiting for you after work? Why didn't you realize it after saying hurtful things to me again and again, or while defending my sister? You had so many chances. I lowered my eyes. The man stubbornly held my hand, looking dazed. But you've never looked at me, the me who needed you. Not even once. I pushed him away, walked in, and locked the door. The heavy rain kept pouring, beating against the window panes on the balcony. When I left, the window was open, and rainwater seeped in. I sat on the sofa, staring at the splashing raindrops. Watched the entire night. A message on my phone shook me awake. I looked down at the tiny white dog avatar. The contact was marked as Luke. When did I add him on Instagram? I can't remember. Actually, I was downstairs at your place last night and didn't leave. I wanted to be there in case something happened so I could help. Are you okay? I bit my lip and typed. I'm fine, thanks for asking. A call came in just seconds later. I picked it up. His clear voice improved my mood quite a bit. Come down and have some breakfast. I paused for a few seconds before realizing. You were downstairs at my place the whole night? Did he stay there all night? Breakfast on a weekday is always in the midst of a crowd. In some way, both Luke and I are night owls. You really don't need to do this for me, Luke. He sat across from me, resting his chin on his hand. That day, no matter who it was, I would have grabbed them. Yes. I once kind of saved Luke's life. Before I turned 24, piano was like it was part of my entire life. So when I found out I could no longer play the piano well, I almost lost it. It was like a painter losing their sight, a chef losing their sense of taste, the sky suddenly being swept with darkness. But time is cruel. I went from anger and unwillingness to numbness. My mom got me a therapist, and I went there for treatment every day. That's when I met Luke. He wasn't there for therapy. He was there with a patient. On that day, there were a lot of people in line, and only the spot next to him was empty. And the reason nobody sat next to him was probably because he looked so shabby, with broken bags piled at his feet, like he was carrying some sort of contagion of unease. I sat down next to him. I didn't care about that stuff. Back then, I was just as lifeless as a zombie. He was holding sheet music in his hands, looking thin, maybe a bit too thin. In our time, music was something for rich kids to learn, and the handwritten music on that sheet looked mismatched with everything about him. I glanced at it, but I could sense, with my natural sensitivity to music, that it was a good piece. And I had no memory of music similar to it. Could it be original by this young man? In the past, I would have seized his shoulders and asked him clearly. But now, what did the piano have to do with me? I leaned back in the chair, ready to close my eyes and rest. Then I heard the sound of paper being crumpled. The boy tore up the sheet music and tossed it into the trash can nearby. I gave him a quick glance but didn't think much of it then. Then I had my routine checkup, chatted with my therapist, and headed back upstairs to my hospital room. I remember that day very clearly. It was my last day in the hospital. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. How was I supposed to live in the future? I couldn't play the piano anymore. Thinking about it made it hard to breathe. Why did I save David that day? My body just acted on its own, and by the time I'd realized, it already happened. Maybe I'd have rushed over for anyone unable to sleep. I wandered up to the hospital rooftop. The endless night wind swirled with bleakness until I saw a figure standing at the edge of the rooftop. That figure took a step forward, one more, and he'd fall off the building. The next second, I rushed over. When I wrapped my arms around the boy's waist, I thought, right. I would save anyone. What are you doing? But the boy didn't appreciate it. He yelled at me loudly, and I suddenly realized he seemed to be the guy who sat next to me earlier today. Would you really intervene even in my suicide? Would anyone care if I disappear from this world? Why? I realized he was crying. Tears dripped onto my hospital gown, dirtying it a bit. There's nothing in this world you can't get past. Living is more important than anything else. I looked at him and said gently, "Stop giving me that empty talk." He suddenly shoved me back, raising his voice and shouted, "You rich people, you don't understand us at all, do you? My mom is sick. She told me if I win the piano competition, she can hang on a bit longer. But I came in first, and it got swapped by you rich folk. My piano was bought with funds raised by the village, and the competition spot was secured by teachers begging all over. Why? Why can you just use money to take away everything I've worked hard for?" He was tugging at my collar, crying so hard. So I told him, "I'm sorry. Stop being so fake." He raised his voice, shouting at me, "You rich people are disgusting, aren't you? Aren't you secretly laughing at me inside? Don't you despise my smell? Would you dare hug me? I'm so dirty, would you dare?" I hugged him. Then all his words were swallowed back down his throat. I patted his back, speaking softly. I'm apologizing not on behalf of the rich. I wasn't the one who took your spot, so why should I apologize? I'm saying sorry for lying just now. I felt his body stiffen, like he wasn't used to being hugged actually. Staring at the endless moon, I said softly, I want to die too. I'm someone who played the piano. But 3 months ago, the doctors told me my tendons can't be fully repaired. There's nothing in this world you can't get past. Living is more important than anything else. Those are just words I use to numb myself. Sorry for saying them to you. He froze in my arms, unsure if he should hug me back, clearly bothered by his own smell. I kept talking, but just now, I changed my mind. Watching someone fall apart in front of me doesn't feel good. I don't want anyone looking at me like that. So, I'm not allowed to die, and neither are you, okay? I ruffled his hair, waiting for his response. There was silence. I sighed and continued. I can't play the piano anymore. The piece you tore up earlier, did you write it? I bet it sounds beautiful. Can you play it for me, please? For me, finish playing my dream. Your noodles are getting cold. A cheek pinch brought me back to reality. Yep, that kid who was about to jump from the rooftop, he's now Luke sitting right in front of me. You're all grown up now, huh? I blurted out of nowhere. He paused and then laughed. You remember me now? Honestly, I didn't want you to remember. He lowered his lashes, fiddling with chopsticks with his long fingers, appearing bored. The old me was really a mess. His voice carried just the right amount of pitifulness mixed with a touch of loneliness. I think this guy has grown not only physically but also mentally. My noodles are cold, but Luke switched mine with his fresh serving. He took a bite. I tried to take mine back, but he was already slurping them up. Then he gave me an innocent blink. I'm really bad at handling younger people. On the way back, we chatted on and off. So, later on, did you get to perform on that stage you always wanted? I asked, feeling a bit touched by all of it. That kid I casually saved one day in the hospital, who would have thought he'd achieve such heights in the music world? Yeah, then I met someone really good to me, but the journey was pretty tough, wasn't it? When I first went abroad, people chased me around like I was a dog. He walked beside me, hands in pockets, smiling even while saying all this. He saw me to my doorstep, then turned around, bending slightly to look at me. But it's all in the past now, right? I'm really lucky after all. I didn't think I'd get to see you again. When Luke left, he handed me a concert invite. It had this fancy silver edging, seemed like it was specially designed for Luke's concert tickets. The kind you'd see going for crazy prices online. Does he have a concert coming up? I wasn't too sure, but I took a good look at the ticket and decided to accept it. Though I was a bit skeptical about whether this kid was messing with me. Arriving at the venue, there was no one around, and wasn't the concert supposed to be in a concert hall? The driver dropped me off at a seaside villa. Why was that? Because this is a concert just for you, a voice with a hint of laughter reached my ear. I turned to look back, and though I had dressed nicely today, I couldn't help but be impressed by how beautifully he was made, as if favored by the gods. Dressed in formal attire for the performance, he bowed to me, reaching for my hand. Thus the mountains and moon were overshadowed, the sea breeze was stolen away. The boundless night fell into his eyes. I never saw such bright stars again. He led me inside the villa, which hadn't been heavily decorated, just a simple floor laid down. Until I saw the piano placed right at the center of the hall, did I realize the villa existed solely for the piano. He pulled me beside the piano. So, Luke, what's on your set list today? But he shook his head. I'm not playing. You're playing. I froze. The crystal chandelier's light reflected in his eyes. I stepped back. You know I can't play. Just then, he wrapped an arm around my waist. Don't step back. Music always serves people. It's about whether you enjoy playing, not about hitting every note perfectly. Who cares if you make a mistake, or aren't smooth? As long as you play, I'll listen. So eventually, after who knows how long, I sat at the piano again. My hand rested on the keys, and then I slowly pressed a key down. In that moment, I trembled. I realized how much I truly loved the piano. But I couldn't play well. Though I adored the piano, I just couldn't play it well. I was terrified, so scared. I'd never had talent, and now my hand didn't work right. I didn't know what I was playing. My hands shook, tears wanted to fall. I recalled what David had once said. Nancy, you don't have the talent, do you know that? But this time, someone held my wrist. Long fingers rested on mine. Luke embraced me. He guided my hand, pressing down keys one by one. True, it didn't sound good, breaks and all, but the notes just kept coming, one after another. People have those things they love but lack talent for in their life, right? For me, it's the piano. Slowly, my left hand joined with chords, playing alongside him. The simplest practice piece brought back memories of countless nights practicing. I don't know when his hand let go. It was the first time I'd played since my hand got injured. The piece was a mess, such that a trained ear probably would have covered their ears. But no one stopped me, nobody scolded me for the awful playing. When I finished, I turned and gave a sheepish smile to the person behind me. Sorry, I guess I still. There was a sound, the ring of a finger striking a key. Luke stood between me and the piano. Squinted, smiled gently, "You're beautiful." Then he leaned down and kissed me. He held onto my waist, I could hardly breathe. He shifted a bit to make me more comfortable, accidentally pressing a few keys. Unintentionally revealing what we were up to on the piano with great difficulty, I pushed him away. "Did I upset you?" Seeing the cautious look in his eyes, every word I wanted to say got swallowed back down. Then, he lowered his gaze, sorting my hair that got messed up earlier. "It's my fault, I got too eager. Actually, I came here today meaning to ask, could you write music for me?" Smoothly changing the subject, effortlessly finding a way to touch me. How come I never realized this guy is such a sly fox? My gaze wandered, blocked off all potential retreats by him. "Nancy, they all say you have no talent. So let me prove you do. I'm willing to be your hands, playing the songs you never finished." The chandelier scattered like countless falling stars in David's eyes. He knelt before me, lifted my wrist. Kissed where my heart was. "Will you compose for me, walk down this path with me?" Epilogue. There was a time when I thought my sister was my biggest enemy in this world. I was just too young and naive. Picking up the piano again was a struggle, even though I had a solid foundation and a husband who plays really well. But composing? That was tougher than I imagined. The setbacks in composing weren't any less than when I played the piano. Every time I tossed my failed sheet music into the trash, my husband would pick it up sympathetically and smooth it out. "This isn't too bad, why throw it away?" After living with him for a while, I realized it. Luke's got a way with words that can be deceiving. Living with him can make you lazy. It's like he's the devil himself. Just then, this devil wrapped his arms around my waist and started kissing my neck softly. "Nancy, haven't your compositions over these past years already outshined your sister's? Why work so hard? Let's do something more fun, okay?" As I struggled out of his embrace, I reached for the sheet music on the table. Sure, my sister had a gift for performing, but her talent in composing wasn't as great. And a few years back, there were scandals about her plagiarizing, and she's been in and out of court ever since. Beating her didn't make me feel any pride. These days, the person I'm desperately trying to surpass is the one lying on top of me right now. "Luke, you must have already finished your composition, didn't you? That's why you're bothering me, right? I'm telling you, this time, I'm going to beat you and win the award. I'm tired of always coming in second to you, so get your hands off me." With one hand controlling me, he used the other to find the remote and close the curtains. He laughed as he messed up my hair. "All right, you'll definitely beat me this time." But, he paused, his voice a bit husky, snuggling into my neck. "Look at me seriously, I've never been in it for the award. What I care about is competing against the person who wants that award just as much as I do.